Hello and welcome to the Talking City podcast. I'm Tyrone Marshall, back in the hosting chair and back on the Talking City podcast for the first time in a while. Nice to be on one of the MEN's most successful podcasts. We are flying at the moment, as are City after yesterday's FA Cup quarter-final win at Bournemouth. I'm joined today by the man that I spent 16 hours with on Mother's Day yesterday. And don't tell my mum and don't tell the mother of my children, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. Simon, it's been a while. How are you?
Yes. Yeah, very well. We certainly made the most of Mother's Day, didn't we? Savinio taking time off to be with his wife and mother of his newborn child. None of that for us. More professional.
No, we don't get that. Our bosses at the MEN don't give us time off to spend time with our families. That is just not allowed. Savinio, you can have paternity leave. Ty, get yourself to Bournemouth on Mother's Day. And that is what we did. And we enjoyed it thoroughly, didn't we, Si? We enjoyed the whole day. We enjoyed the trip. We enjoyed the chat. But most of all, we enjoyed the football. And it was a very successful afternoon for City. I mean, I was thinking about it this morning. Is there an argument that's the biggest result of the season so far?
I think you might be right. You know, do you know what made it for me was it was nice to be surprised by City in a good way. Yeah. Because a lot of this season has been like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how bad they are. And I said to you after the first half, like it's depressing watching City now because it's not a surprise how bad they are. And the first half they were very lucky to be 1-0 down despite having missed a penalty and had a few other good chances because Bournemouth just played them off the park really and controlled the game. So it was nice to be sitting there at the end of the game thinking, wow, City have absolutely bossed this second half in a way that we've not seen in forever. And so, yeah, I certainly think it's up there as one of the best results of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite a strange game because that first half, I agree with you. I thought Bournemouth were the better team and looked the more likely winners at that point. The people we spoke to after the game in terms of, I spoke to Bernardo in the mix zone. You did Guardiola's press conference. Both kind of said that City played well in the first half and they certainly had the better chances. But I don't know. It did feel in the end of that first half like City were struggling to kind of get a foothold in the game, which made the turnaround and the way they totally dominated that second half. I mean, Bournemouth did not. I can't remember them having a shot in the second half. They certainly didn't have a chance. It made it all the more surprising, didn't it, that the game just did turn around to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I disagree with Pep and Bernardo on that first half, just because, I mean, Pep's whole praise of the performance was because they played how he wanted them to play. And he said, he picked these legendary players, not old players, legendary players who have achieved so much with the club. Because when the team came out, there was a head loss among all fans, or a lot of fans were like, why on earth is not just, say, Gundogan starting, but Gundogan and Silva starting, and not just them two, but De Bruyne starting, and not just those three, but Kovacic starting, like in a midfield that has been constantly overrun all season. Why are you starting 4 of the oldest players with the slowest legs in the squad? And that first half, they couldn't get going. They couldn't get the foot on the ball. There was a lot of kind of panicked passes back to Edison's right foot, which is just, it's like the antithesis of Guardiola's stuff because his game is based on, everyone making the right decisions and being in the right position to make the right pass. And it just wasn't that. Like the chances that they had were, I would say, probably a faster tempo than we're used to seeing from what Guardiola wants. And his whole game and his reason for being pleased with the performance is because they played their game, their passing game, rather than being sucked into the faster game that Bournemouth wanted. And yeah, I think we saw that majestically in the second half. I don't think we saw it that well in the first half.
No, it did feel one of the big things. I mean, we'll come on in a minute to the player who most obviously changed the game. But generally speaking, it felt like one of the noticeable changes from first half to second half. I mean, I said to you a couple of times in that first half that it felt like that midfield and those players were getting swamped. And whatever you do, don't call them old. We'll come on to that in the second part, maybe. But it certainly felt like they were getting swamped. Like Bournemouth were just winning that battle of intensity, weren't they? That battle of modern football, as Guardiola called it recently, and Bournemouth being a prime example. And City really upped it in the second half, didn't they? And they, even with those 30-something players, they really responded and they kind of matched Bournemouth at what they do. And once they matched Bournemouth, they had the better players, and that allowed them to dominate the game.
Yeah, they kind of matched it imperceptibly almost. It was just kind of, you didn't sort of see, oh, they've changed the game. It was just thinking, Bournemouth haven't really done anything here. Bournemouth haven't really sort of, had a chance to make the game their own or anything like that. And it was, credit, I think, to the way that City set up. And, I sort of follow a few tactical people who have sort of praised Guardiola for exactly that and said for all the sort of way that the game is now about, oh, you've got to have your identity, you've got to stick to what you do best. Like Guardiola still focuses on what the opposition do and how he thinks they can hurt them. And he said after the game, he set up for how he thought Bournemouth would play. And you have to say it paid off, because this team, with all the players that the fans were moaning about before the game, and we were thinking, how are they going to win this game with this team? They did it, and they did have a lot of help from Nico O'Reilly in the second half. But the team came out and everyone thought, what is this team? And then at half time, O'Reilly comes on for Kusanov, which means Guardiola moving inside and O'Reilly going outside. And again, there's nobody in the ground who feels more confident at that point. But it worked. And so full credit to City, full credit to Pep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it didn't feel like the kind of substitution that changes a game, does it? When you saw it at half time, you were just like, oh, okay, like it doesn't feel like it's going to change the game, but somehow it did. I mean, he offered a couple of really good surging runs early on. The cross for Haaland's goal was a brilliant ball in, just a striker's dream, really, to apply that first time finish. The flick from Marmoush was sensational, and I mean, he really did make a massive impact again, didn't he? Considering he's not a left back, he's being played out of position. Really, he had such a big impact on that game, didn't he?
Yeah. And this is that's exactly what Pep said after the game, which was quite pleasing, because a lot of people who know O'Reilly very well have sort of maintained he's not a left back. He's not a left back, and he's not always shone at left back for that reason. It's not like every time he's played he's been brilliant, but that was a transformative performance for the team and a real moment for O'Reilly to say, I am here and I can make a difference, whatever happens. And it was like that after the game. Despite him not being a left back, he has done more than Matheus Nunes has done. And we give Nunes some slack because he's not a right back. And we say, well, he's not a right back. So, but like the errors he made for the Bournemouth goal were terrible, and he got skinned by Semenyo quite a few times in that first half. Nunes, signed for 51 million, has never had that kind of game where maybe I've just forgotten it, but I can't remember him having that kind of game that a young boy from the academy has had. And I think that is kind of as much of Nunes and the money spent on him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a bad afternoon for Nunes, wasn't it? There's no doubt about it. He was City's weakest player, City's poorest player, and he's not a right back. But yeah, you look at O'Reilly and the impact you can have out of position, and Nunes could do that, but just hasn't. We were talking about it in the car on the way home, and said that he hasn't. He's had chances now at right back. His best spell was maybe on the left wing for City. But even as a central midfielder, he just doesn't really have a position in this team. He's still not nailed down a position in this team, and that is obviously a concern. But yeah, O'Reilly was huge and made such a big difference. And we said before, was this the best win of the season, the biggest win of the season? Something that kind of plays to that is the celebrations at the end. And Guardiola was absolutely loving those celebrations, wasn't he? And you have to say the away end was brilliant in the sunshine at Bournemouth. A bit down the side of the goal in the normal away, and then a bit behind the goal with the larger allocations in the FA Cup. But Guardiola was leading those celebrations, was getting so involved in those celebrations, pushed Nico O'Reilly in front of the away end once he finally got to him. And I don't know, the way Guardiola celebrated that win, and yes, I think he takes incredible pride in that FA Cup record, but it kind of felt like a big day, really. And it felt like he felt it was a big day, given the way he was celebrating and the enthusiasm he showed in those celebrations.
Yeah, and I think, it was Haaland missed a number of very good chances, including the penalty in the first half. But then he scores at the start of the second half, and you think to him. And then Haaland goes down with this worrying-looking knee injury. And, it's been written so many times before this season where City will sort of get themselves into a match or back into a match, and then something bad happens. And I think even Pep was fearing the worst. So for Marmoush to come on for Haaland and score inside 60 seconds, I think Pep kicked the chair in celebration when that goal went in. He was so happy, and then at the end, it felt like Pep felt it was a day of vindication for him, and that him picking these legendary players, which he's been criticised, had a lot of criticism for most of the season. Vindication of his own ability, because he's on Friday, he said he's been very poor this season, but he backed those players sort of against popular demand, if you want to say it like that, and they delivered. And Bernardo was good, and Gundogan was good, and De Bruyne was decent, and Kovacic was as well. And I think, it is an incredible record. 7 straight semi-finals at Wembley in the FA Cup, and it is a phenomenal record. But also, it was kind of almost like reassurance for Guardiola that this feeling that he's had all season, that these players aren't done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a big turnaround as well. And Guardiola touched on this post-match, and we'll come on to a lot of his comments in the second half of the podcast. But this kind of nightmare season they've had, I think it's probably fair to call it that. Even if they're going to win the FA Cup now, it's only going to salvage a little bit of this season. It's obviously not gone to plan, but it kind of started, or the start of it was around the time they went to Bournemouth in the league, didn't they? And they lost 2-1, and they just didn't compete that day, and there were really worrying signs there. What changed between that game and winning at Bournemouth here? And did this win kind of show that they are out the other side of that now? They're out the other side of their nightmare, November, December, especially. Or is there still kind of, is it too early to be getting carried away and saying they're through the other side?
I think it's still much too early. Pep was very, 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 or has been in recent weeks, very, very critical of that Bournemouth defeat. I didn't think it was too bad at the time. They weren't good, but 3 days earlier they'd lost at Spurs, and all 4 of the central defenders had got injured. So Nathan Ake and Manu Akanji played and were, I don't know, between 30 and 50% fit. Kyle Walker came back from being injured, and looked about 40% fit. So yeah, they were in the sense that they played how you would expect those players to perform at that level of fitness. And for me, there hasn't been enough change. After that first half, yesterday, you were thinking, well, there's not really, they're as bad as they were back then. And it's at a point where, yes, they've got injuries, but the players on the pitch should be doing better. The players that you have should be performing better than they are. And that has been a worry. It's a worry that they've had long weeks to prepare for Forest and Brighton, and they've not been able to win those games. So the second half really kind of changed everything and made you think, got enough, got what it takes. I wouldn't be confident that they will go to Forest and they'll go to Wembley and beat Forest in the semi, because Forest are a decent team and City haven't had many results at all against decent teams this season. They lost to Forest this month. But the second half, and in Pep's view, the attitude across the whole game was something that was different from the last 5 months, and is something that he will kind of cling to and try and draw more out of in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it is going to be fascinating now to see if they can kind of make it even just a mini turning point. If they can kind of keep this intensity, this attitude, and those kind of intangible ingredients he mentioned, and whether they can build on this, or like you say, whether they, they should beat Leicester, obviously, but whether they go to Old Trafford next weekend and struggle again, or whether they struggle again against Forest in the semi-final, or whether we have, whether he did see enough on Sunday to believe that the team are taking a step forward. And the one big area of concern going forward, obviously, in terms of securing that Champions League qualification and going on to win the Cup, is Erling Haaland. I mean, we're waiting on an update on his fitness. It was an eventful afternoon for Haaland, who missed that glut of early chances, including the penalty, scored, and then banged his knee and was clearly in a pretty bad way. The knee came back on and tried to limp it off, but as soon as he started running, you could see he was in pain again, and he had to come off. It certainly looked worrying, didn't it?
Yeah, it's always always takes a lot for Haaland to go off, especially when and he could be the difference maker. He tried his best to come back on, but he just, it wasn't going to happen. And I think, City don't like to take risks with him, but they also trust him and what he says about his body. And when he's saying, no, it's not good, they've got to trust him. I think he left the stadium in a boot, which doesn't necessarily mean it's really bad, but suggests that there is at least some concern over it. And he will be checked pretty soon, and they'll see what the damage is. But I had messages from like Italy last night, because Italy are playing Norway in June. So now they're thinking, oh, will Haaland be fit for this game? So that some people are seeing it as, we'll wait for more medical diagnosis. But as positive a day as it was yesterday, it would kind of maybe sum up the season a little bit if it turns out that Haaland is sidelined for most of the rest of the season now. So we're just gonna have to wait on that, I think.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, at the latest, we'll get an update from Guardiola on Tuesday in his press conference ahead of the Leicester game. Right, that's all for part one. We'll be back after the break to look at a couple more bits from Bournemouth and to look ahead to that midweek fixture. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. So some interesting stuff post-match as well yesterday, Si. Like I said, I was in the mix zone. You were in Guardiola's press conference. From reading the transcript from Guardiola and his quotes, there was some really interesting stuff there on kind of the regrets of not giving young players more. And I thought the stuff about what's been missing this season was particularly interesting as well. He basically said it's not, this slump hasn't been down to tactics. It's not tactics, and mentioned that heart and soul and desire that's gone and what they need to get. And I mean, he basically said that's more important than selling players and signing players, getting that back. And that's normally something that he says is always there with his team, doesn't he? The number of times you've been in a press conference and he says at the end of the season, we're always there, in that he means we're always in the title race, in the Champions League, going for the Champions League, going for cup competitions. Come this time of year, he means they're always there. And this year, they're not there. And he's kind of put that down, I guess, to those more intangible qualities, aren't they? That heart and soul and desire, I think, were the three words he mentioned. And it felt like sort of very interesting and informative stuff from him.
Yeah, and it's classic. It's from the Pep playbook of kind of bringing it up after a victory and bringing it up after he thinks he's seen enough change in his players to be able to say it. But yeah, big words, really, saying heart and desire. And he mentioned the defeat of at Bournemouth in the league and said, it was unacceptable that, however much somebody's struggling or whatever, there are certain levels that you have to meet for your teammates, and they were not met. And like I was saying earlier, it ties into kind of his belief that this group of players are still good enough. They've just lost some reason, and that is understandable because of everything that they've won. But you can't it can't let you off forever. And I thought it was really interesting because as much as the press conference was Pep kind of saying, "Wow, I was right about these players." Like you say, he also spoke about he will always have regrets that he didn't play Nico O'Reilly or James McAtee a bit more this season. And, I know there have been times where they've considered playing O'Reilly and in kind of some quite high profile games and haven't in the end. And Pep is so reluctant to move away from, a group of players that are giving him so much, but that he still thinks they're good enough. But at the same time, Sunday's game kind of proved him right and wrong in a sense of these players can still do it, but maybe if I give him the corner a bit more quickly and come out of things a bit more quickly, because, O'Reilly was brilliant. And, Pep likes to stick with those players who he knows are trusted. But like I said, the young players are fearless and they've no reputation to lose because they're only making their reputation. So it was, a really interesting account from Guardiola of the problems they have had this season. And look, as well, he said, he puts himself at the top of the list of the issues they've had. As much as he was critical of players' performances this season, it is not an attempt to say, "Oh, everyone's let me down. I've been brilliant," but they've just not been good enough.
Yeah, he did say he puts himself at the top of the list, I think, didn't he? And yeah, talking of interesting stuff, like I spoke to Bernardo in the mix zone afterwards, and
this is what we're waiting for.
Yeah, we were talking about O'Reilly, and he said we need that fresh blood sometimes, and we need the legs, and kind of got onto how important has that been this season, that bringing young players through, and he basically said that was not the problem. So we got onto has a lot been made of the age profile of this team? Do you think that's been overplayed? And he said that's people that don't understand the game. And then when I asked him in what sense, and there was only me down there speaking to him, he said, "Tell me which players, give me names," which rather put me on the spot. One of those moments where you think, should I name players? Should I name you? Shall I name you? Yeah, I'm gonna have to name you, Bernardo.
It's always horrible, isn't it, when player or manager,
turn the questions on you. Yeah. Which players?
Player or manager just turning the question round on you, and you're like,
"Yeah, absolutely."
Oh, right.
What do I do here? I've not had media training.
I mean, fair play for doing it, and because it has been said and it's been raised. And Bernardo might not be the oldest, but he's played more than anyone this season, and he's looked leggy. And
He's looked older than
his
30, hasn't he, at times?
ability to run has always it's always been his USP. That's what he can do that no one else can do. And if that is gone, then it's a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, in the end, it's very revealing, and the quotes are really good. They'll be on the website now if people want to read them. But he made that point that him and Kovacic are 30 years old, and basically they've had 6 bad months and have been written off out of nowhere that they're old and not good enough. And it was, I think it finished with, that's people that don't understand the game, never played the game, and probably don't understand a thing about football, which I didn't take personally. But it was fascinating that he did say, we're going to prove people wrong. We've got time for that. We'll be back. Don't worry. So it's clearly something that has struck a nerve in the dressing room. It's clearly something the players are very aware of. And it felt a talking point yesterday because, we saw the same thing on social media before the game where loads of City fans were basically saying, like you said, what is this team? This team is too old to play away at Bournemouth. And they did prove them wrong. And it's, it is fascinating that those players are clearly aware that they have been written off as old before their time, and are determined to prove people wrong. And it's going to be a big summer in terms of an overhaul of the squad. But those 30-something players clearly believe that they've got what it takes to take City back to the top. And maybe being called old pretty much all season has given them that kind of energy and desire and that heart and soul to come back and prove people wrong. And it did look a bit like that yesterday. And the other thing that he mentioned, that Guardiola mentioned, is this cup record. I mean, first team in history to reach 7 semi-finals in a row. It's a record that is probably never going to be beaten, and it just shows the remarkable consistency, isn't it? We've seen the title wins. This is the first time they've really kind of slipped from being, if not winning the title, at least second. But we've seen other teams in this era that have success and then fall away and have a season totally off the radar. That's never really happened to City. Even in this difficult season, they've reached another Wembley semi-final. The consistency to deliver some kind of success every season is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And in the same way that sort of, Pep will put 4 in a row above the treble because that is brilliance over 4 years rather than 1 year. There's a lot of luck needed to win the treble, but to be that consistent over so long is not luck. And yeah, they've lost 9 years that hasn't been at Wembley. It is just incredible. He's not lost at a ground that isn't Wembley in the FA Cup since 2018. And that will roll on till next year now because they're back at Wembley for the semi-final and possibly the final. So it is amazing. This season, who will be worthy Premier League winners, but decided in their season that the FA Cup was not worth risking a stronger team. I think they got dealt a pretty tough hand in terms of all their Premier League fixtures being shoved around the Champions League last 16 game. But they made that decision in the FA Cup and went out to Plymouth, and people say, "Oh, City have had an easy run to." Again in the FA Cup, things like that. So, they have turned up again and again and again and again and again in any circumstances. And this year has been more difficult than most. The last 3 rounds, so Bournemouth, Plymouth, Leyton Orient, they've gone behind and they've had to scrap to get back into it. And they've done that and won the game. And it is, just extraordinary. And like Pep says, I don't think it will be matched or beaten because it is not normal to have so few off days.
No, and it feels like it sums the team up in a way that even in a season that clearly hasn't gone to plan, that has been very difficult, they're still doing something and producing something that is essentially mind-blowing and is a record that, like you say, will probably be never beaten, even in what is probably their most difficult season since Guardiola's first season in charge. And they're still achieving something that takes your breath away, really. And I think it kind of, like you say, it sums up the standards the team have set and the standards that they can continue to set. And moving on now to Leicester in midweek. I mean, it should be a walk in the park, this, shouldn't it, really? What are you expecting from the game? I guess we want to see City build on that performance from Sunday. We'll probably see some changes. I'm guessing Gonzalez will come back in. Maybe some of those old boys in midfield will be given a rest. But it should be a game that City are cruising through.
Yeah, it was a surprise, really, that Bournemouth, he should be back in for the Leicester game. But yeah, Leicester look like one of the worst teams to have been in the Premier League. Or, the gap between them and the rest is certainly one of the biggest. So, and they do appear to be in free fall. So Leicester at home is about the biggest gimme you're going to get. And yeah, big opportunity for City to put some points back on the board in this race for the top four. And I don't see a way in which they don't take it, albeit it will be an interesting night because of the ticket protests and the proposed boycott from a lot of fans to not take their seats or be silent in their seats for the first 9 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to finish on that then and the protest. I mean, fill us in a little bit on kind of the reasons for the protest and what we're expecting then, because like you say, it's a game that on paper isn't going to get the pulses racing, albeit it is important for City in terms of that Champions League race, and they still got a lot of work to do in the Premier League to make sure of it. But certainly early on, there is going to be a lot of focus on events off the pitch, isn't there? So fill us in really on for those that don't know, on the protest and why it's happening and what people should be looking out for.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote kind of a lot of stuff in the international break on tickets, and I did a piece on City's relationship with third-party sites, and they basically have 8 authorized third-party ticket sellers who get about 550 tickets, hospitality tickets for Man City tickets into Google. The top 3 searches that come up are all unauthorized sellers who happen to have tickets from somewhere that nobody knows. I think about 10% of season ticket holders on average return their tickets every game to the ticket exchange, where the club will pay that supporter a 19th of the price of their season ticket and then put that ticket on the ticket exchange for a normal kind of match day price. So the club makes a little bit of money, but those tickets are seemingly ending up on these unauthorized third-party sites, going for massive amounts of money. There aren't the checks that require you to sort of be a City fan. Most stewards do a very good job, but they can't police everything. And there have been issues in the most high-profile home matches of late where both Real Madrid fans and Liverpool fans have kind of been in home areas of the ground. Rather, it's an atmosphere issue. It's a safety issue, and there are also the issue of season tickets. Sorry, this is a really long answer, but it's a lot to explain. Season tickets have not been announced for next season. Certain clubs have frozen. Some clubs have raised prices. City's official fan board, and said we would like a freeze, among a few other things, and then requested an extraordinary meeting with the club on season tickets to sort of discuss things. The club agreed that meeting, but didn't set a date and went very quiet, effectively ghosted the fan board when they were trying to set a date. So that was 6-7 weeks without setting a date. Then the club agreed to a date. Then on the same day, I think, announced a new partnership with official resale partner via GoGo, who are a company who have a difficult reputation for not being not being a way of getting a ticket safely and securely, as I think the press release said. So as a result, that is City's 9th official resale partner. So fans who have had enough are encouraging fans to either stay inside the concourse for the first 9 minutes of the game or to stay silent for the first 9 minutes of the game, as a way of saying the club are damaging the atmosphere and this is what will happen if it continues to go unchecked. So it'd be interesting to see that. It'd be interesting to see the support there is in the ground. Just like anecdotally, I visited a supporters club a few weeks ago, and I'd been to the same one maybe last year. And the difference in attitude, there was so much more negatives and the decisions they're making than there was a year ago. There's a lot more people willing to defend the club last year, and now it's kind of a majority who are very angry and annoyed. And it's a communication issue, but it's also a decision-making issue, where the club are just not making decisions that are making supporters happy.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to be fascinating to see how that protest goes. How many do stay on the concourse? What the atmosphere is like in those opening 9 minutes, and we will bring you all the coverage from the Etihad on Wednesday and all the details around that protest. So stay tuned to the MEN, and we'll have all those details for you. Me and Si will be there again. But for now, that is everything. Please do leave us a like, leave us a 5-star review. Remember to subscribe to get the latest podcasts in your feed. And we'll be back later in the week, I think on Friday, for a special episode previewing the derby. There'll be a little bit of looking back at Leicester, but I think we all know which is the biggest game this week. I'm sure we'll touch on that protest in the podcast as well, but there'll be a lot of derby focus on Friday. So remember to subscribe to get that in your feed. But for now, thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you all soon.